Bold escape. Even as blood stained the soil, something stronger than fear filled the air. Unity. And when the Vorlith pulled back, retreating in confusion and rage, the survivors cheered. Not because the war was over, it was far from done, but because for the first time they saw hope. That night, around makeshift fires and inside crowded ships, soldiers of different worlds spoke together. They shared stories, traded food, sang songs in languages the others could not understand. Yet somehow the meaning was clear. They were no longer prey. They were no longer waiting for heroes. Together they had become heroes. The galaxy began to change in those moments. Where there had been silence, there was now defiance. Where there had been despair, there was now courage. And all of it flowed from the example of the Deathworlders who refused to fall. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the stars. His crew was tired, his ships damaged, but around him he saw something new. Allies. True allies. He knew the war was far from finished, but he also knew the Vorlith had made their greatest mistake. They had awakened not just the wrath of humanity, but the unity of a galaxy. They wanted us to be alone, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Now they'll face us all. And in the silence of space, the galaxy seemed to answer back. Part 7. The Final Stand. The galaxy held its breath. The Vorlith had gathered their mightiest fleet at the edge of the Quarren Rift, determined to crush humanity and their allies once and for all. They believed they had learned the patterns of human war, their stubbornness, their defiance, but they had underestimated the Deathworlders in a way no one else had. Humans did not fight predictably. They adapted, they endured, and they turned suffering into strength. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, looking out at the approaching Vorlith armada. It was the largest he had ever seen. Dreadnoughts stretched like mountains across the void, frigates swarming like locusts, and hundreds of smaller craft ready to consume everything in their path. His crew was tired, but determination shone in their eyes. "This is it," he said quietly, voice carrying through the comms. "For our dead. For the innocent. For every world that cannot fight for itself. We hold, or none will." Human carriers moved into formation. From their bays, thousands of fighters surged into space, engines flaring bright against the darkness. Allied fleets followed. Yilvari cruisers with lances of pure energy. Cairn haulers repurposed into ramming monsters. Smaller civilizations' ships now armed with scavenged weapons, all ready to face annihilation. The first shots rang out. Vorlith dreadnoughts fired in unison, their cannons slicing through void and space alike. Explosions blossomed, lighting up the darkness with terrible beauty. Human gunships twisted and weaved, dodging energy blasts with impossible precision, returning fire that tore open enemy armor. Fighters darted between colossal hulls, striking at weak points, never pausing, never retreating. Hours stretched into endless fury. The Vorlith pushed forward, attempting to crush the human center, but they could not break it. Every Deathworlder pilot lost was replaced by another. Every ship destroyed was avenged. Human tactics were brutal but brilliant, taking full advantage of the terrain of the rift and the versatility of their allies. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The Vorlith flagship, Eternal Maw, led the assault, its weapons blazing, its hull shimmering with dark energy. The humans waited. Then, in perfect coordination, carriers launched swarms of fighters straight at the dreadnought while Yilvari cruisers flanked it. The cairn haulers rammed its sides, drills tearing into reinforced armor. Every strike, every maneuver was calculated but relentless. Explosions racked the flagship until it shuddered, its energy fields failing. With a final devastating salvo from the human fleet, it erupted into fire and debris. Across the Vorlith lines, chaos spread. Their formations collapsed. Their command ships fell one by one. They had ruled through terror, but humanity had shown them something they could not fight: defiance. Fear had become their enemy, and it cut deeper than any weapon. When the last Vorlith ship was finally destroyed or forced to flee, the silence of space was overwhelming. Allies floated among the wreckage, battered but alive. Pilots drifted in small pods, some shaken, some crying, some laughing in disbelief. Humanity had endured what no one thought possible. Admiral Reyes allowed himself a moment to breathe. He looked out at the stars, blackened by war but still shining. "We did it," he whispered. "Not for glory, not for fame, but for survival, for justice, for the countless lives that had been saved. Around him his crew cheered softly, some weeping, some clasping hands in quiet relief, and the galaxy took note. Across planets and colonies, alien civilizations whispered stories of the Deathworlders who had answered the call. They spoke not of perfect saints but of humans, scarred, relentless, and unyielding. They spoke of warriors who had stood when all seemed lost, who had carried the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders, and who had refused to break. Earth's Deathworlders had come when no one else could. They had fought through fire, pain, and loss. They had forged unity from despair, and their example had awakened courage across the stars. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity rose. The war was over, but the story of the Deathworlders would endure. They were not heroes in the traditional sense. They were survivors, fighters, protectors forged by hardship, and when the universe remembered those who had refused to let the innocent suffer, it would remember Earth. In the silence after battle, Admiral Reyes turned to his crew and said, "We answered the call, and the galaxy now knows what we are." And for the first time in centuries, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if honoring the people who had refused to surrender. Part 2. Whispers of Earth. The plea for help drifted through the void like a dying ember, faint but not extinguished. Those who caught it did not know where it came from, but they repeated it anyway, as if clinging to the words alone could hold back despair. Across ruined sectors, survivors passed it along, one more call for salvation. And in the passing, a single name began to surface from forgotten corners of memory. Earth. The name was not spoken with hope at first, but with unease. Old warnings came back into conversation. For centuries, most galactic species had quietly agreed to avoid Earth. It was called a death world, a planet where gravity pressed harder than most bones could bear, where storms tore skies open, and where every living creature fought tooth and claw to survive. To outsiders, the idea that such a place could create a people was madness. To live there seemed impossible. To thrive there was unthinkable, yet rumors persisted. Traders whispered of strange humans who had once traveled beyond their system. They were not many, but stories of their strength remained. Some spoke of humans who could walk under crushing gravity with ease, who could climb mountains others would never attempt, who survived in climates that would kill most within hours. Others whispered that they were a violent race, too dangerous to be trusted, too unpredictable to welcome. But in the ruins of collapsing civilizations, fear of humans seemed small compared to fear of the Vorlith. If Earth exists, some whispered, let them come. Even if they are monsters, perhaps they are monsters who fight on the right side. On a refugee station orbiting the remains of Koresh Prime, an elder told a group of frightened children stories to keep them from crying. He told them of humans. His voice was cracked, his scales dull, but his words carried a strange hope. They say their world itself is like war. They say they breathe storms and drink fire. If anyone can fight the Vorlith, it will be them. The children, wide-eyed and silent, listened as if he were telling a legend. For them, Earth became not a terror, but a dream. On the other side of the galaxy, in hidden networks where smugglers and wanderers spoke freely, the idea grew bolder. Messages were exchanged. What if Earth answers? What if the Deathworlders are real? Some laughed at the thought. Others clung to it desperately, because if Earth did not answer, there would be no one left to answer at all. Meanwhile, far away on that blue and green planet, signals flickered across the edge of human space. At first, Earth's people thought they were nothing more than background noise, broken static from the void. But as engineers pieced fragments together, a picture formed. Voices crying, fleets burning, children weeping, entire civilizations begging for someone, anyone, to rise. The leaders of Earth listened in silence. Generals, scientists, and even ordinary citizens stared at the recovered broadcast with heavy hearts. The images of ruined worlds were not so different from old memories of Earth's own wars. The cries of parents clutching children sounded too familiar. Humanity knew suffering, they knew loss, but they also knew resistance. For days, debates raged. Earth had been cautious since reaching the stars. They had fought hard to tame their own world, harder still to survive their own conflicts. Was it wise to throw themselves into another species' war? Was it their duty to intervene in a galaxy that had once feared and avoided them? Yet the answer seemed clear to those who remembered Earth's long struggles. How could they remain silent when they knew what it meant to beg and be ignored? Humanity was not perfect, but they carried one unshakable truth. When the helpless cried, someone had to stand. In hidden corners of Earth, preparations began. Hangars. A sight of dreadnoughts, human captains barked orders with steady voices. Where most pilots would falter under pressure, humans pressed harder, reckless yet calculated. For hours, the battle raged. Alien witnesses clung to every broadcast, hardly believing what they saw. "They are not just fighting," whispered one Yilvari officer watching through trembling hands. "They are hunting." The Vorlith were forced to adapt. They focused their fire on the largest human carriers, hoping to break the fleet's backbone. One massive dreadnought unleashed its main cannon, splitting a human destroyer in half. Flames consumed the ship, and for a moment fear crept into the watching allies. Perhaps even the Deathworlders could not withstand such monsters. But then came the answer. From the burning wreckage, survivors launched their fighters in one last desperate strike. Those pilots, instead of retreating, dove straight at the dreadnought. Explosions blossomed across its hull, and before long the beast of metal shuddered, cracked, and died. The humans had turned their loss into a weapon. Alien survivors watching felt something they had not felt in years. Hope. They saw that humans did not fight for victory alone. They fought because they refused to surrender, no matter the cost. That defiance spread like fire. Other scattered fleets began to rally behind them. Small groups of ships that had once hidden now joined the fight, encouraged by the sight of Deathworlders charging headlong into the void. By the end of the battle, the Vorlith were not victorious. They had lost ships, flagships even, that no empire had ever touched before. They withdrew in frustration, leaving smoldering wrecks in their wake. And for the first time, the galaxy saw the impossible, the Vorlith retreating. On every surviving channel, the news spread. The humans fought them. The humans stopped them. Across burning colonies and fractured stations, survivors whispered the same thing with trembling voices. The Deathworlders have come. But among the humans, there was no celebration. In their hangars, soldiers carried the bodies of fallen comrades with quiet reverence. On their ships, captains read the names of the dead in solemn tones. For them, this was not a victory of glory, it was survival bought with blood. Yet even as they mourned, their eyes were fixed forward. They knew the Vorlith would return stronger. And when they did, humanity would be ready. The clash had begun. Titans had met in the dark. And for the first time, the galaxy dared to believe the war could be won. Part 5. The Cost of Defiance. The galaxy cheered when news of the battle spread. But on the decks of human ships, there was no cheering. There was only silence. Victory had come, yes, but victory had teeth. Human destroyers floated in pieces, their crews gone to the void. Carriers counted rows of body bags lined in their hangars, each one draped in the flag of Earth. In the infirmaries, doctors worked until their hands shook, trying to save what was left of broken soldiers. For every Vorlith dreadnought destroyed, there was a human price. The galaxy did not see it at first, they only saw the retreat of their tormentors. But the humans knew. They carried that weight in their hearts, and they did not hide it. Every loss was recorded, every fallen name spoken aloud. Humanity remembered. Humanity mourned. Yet humanity did not stop. On one battered carrier, the resolute Dawn, a young pilot named Arya sat in her flight suit long after the battle was over. Her ship was gone, torn apart in the fighting, but she had ejected in time. Around her, friends she had trained with were missing, empty bunks where laughter used to be. She pressed her helmet to her chest and whispered, "For them we fight harder." She was not alone in that vow. Across the fleet's voices echoed the same promise. The Vorlith expected fear. They expected broken morale. But the Deathworlders only grew sharper with every loss. When a ship fell, its crew's sacrifice became fuel for vengeance. When soldiers died, their comrades carried their memory into battle. Where others would retreat, humans surged forward as though pain itself was their weapon. Allies were stunned. The Yilvari commander who once doubted them spoke in awe after watching humans fight again. "They do not crumble," he said softly to his council. "They burn brighter." Refugees who had thought the Deathworlders were monsters now saw them kneel to comfort alien children, sharing food even when their own rations were low. They saw them bury the dead of other species alongside their own. Humanity was proving piece by piece that their strength was not cruelty. It was endurance. But endurance came with scars. After the third great battle, fleets returned to resupply at a hidden base. The hangars smelled of fuel and blood. Soldiers limped through corridors, bandaged and pale. And still they trained. Engineers rebuilt damaged fighters with trembling hands, refusing to rest. "We don't get to stop," one of them muttered. "Not until they can sleep safe again." Even so, cracks showed. Messages from Earth poured in. Letters from families, recordings of children's voices, prayers and songs sent across light years. Some soldiers listened with tears in their eyes, clutching the sound of home like a lifeline. Others refused to play the messages at all, afraid the longing would weaken them. Humanity had always been divided in how it bore pain, but united in this: the fight must go on. The Vorlith began to notice. Reports from their commanders grew anxious. "The humans do not break," one report read. "They suffer heavy losses and yet return stronger. Their dead seem to fight beside them." Fear spread quietly through Vorlith ranks, though their leaders denied it, and so the war entered a darker phase. The Vorlith struck harder, hunting human carriers with ruthless precision. Entire fleets vanished into ambushes. But humanity answered each strike with fury. 1,000 deaths would not stop them. A shattered world would only harden their will. They carried the cost of defiance openly, and in doing so, they taught the galaxy a lesson. True strength is not found in avoiding pain, but in bearing it. On the deck of the Iron Will, Admiral Reyes addressed his weary crew after another brutal clash. His voice was rough, his eyes shadowed. "We have lost much. We will lose more before this is done. But hear me now. We will not be remembered for how many of us fell. We will be remembered for refusing to fall alone. Every strike we make is for the living and the dead. Every battle we win tells the galaxy they are not alone." The soldiers listened, exhausted but unbroken. And in that moment they understood. Their fight was not just about defeating the Vorlith. It was about carrying the unbearable weight so others would not have to. The galaxy had asked for heroes. What they received were Deathworlders who paid the price of defiance in blood and tears, and still chose to fight. Part 6. The Galaxy Rises. The war had dragged on longer than anyone expected. Human fleets bled in silence, carrying scars from every battle. Their ships were worn, their numbers cut down, yet their spirit did not break. Word spread through the stars of how the Deathworlders fought, not for conquest, not for glory, but so others could live. The galaxy began to listen. The Ylvari were the first to rise. Their High Council, once paralyzed by fear, finally chose to fight. They sent a fleet of silver cruisers to join the humans. When the battered, resolute Dawn limped into a rendezvous point, they were not alone. Ylvari ships formed a protective circle around it. Their commander saluted Admiral Reyes across the comms and said, "Your dead will not stand alone anymore. Ours will fall beside them." For the first time in centuries, Ylvari warriors returned to battle. Then came the Cairn. They were miners and builders, not soldiers. But when they saw recordings of humans shielding alien children with their own bodies, something inside them shifted. They stripped their industrial haulers and turned them into warships. Their vessels were slow and ugly, but their massive drills became weapons that tore through enemy hulls. They marched into the war chanting a single phrase: "If humans bleed for us, we will bleed for them." Across the galaxy, one by one, voices joined the chorus. Small civilizations that had once hidden in fear came out of the dark. Supply convoys appeared in human docks, food, medicine, fuel. Refugees volunteered to work as engineers and medics. Some even asked to fight alongside the Deathworlders. Humanity, once isolated, was no longer alone. The Vorlith noticed. Their reports grew frantic. What was once a war of conquest was becoming something worse for them, a united resistance. The Vorlith Empire had ruled through fear, but now their enemies had learned courage. And at the heart of that courage stood humanity. Admiral Reyes saw it with his own eyes during the next great battle. The Vorlith fleet descended on a colony world, expecting to slaughter another defenseless population. Instead, they found not just humans, but dozens of species standing side by side. Ylvari cruisers flanked human destroyers. Cairn haulers surged forward, drills tearing into Vorlith armor. Even tiny shuttlecraft flown by desperate refugees joined the fray, firing with weapons scavenged from wreckage. The battle was chaos. Human gunships screamed through the void, cutting apart enemy squadrons. Cairn vessels rammed Vorlith frigates head-on, refusing to back away. Ylvari energy lances carved brilliant scars across the black sky. For the first time, the Vorlith wavered. Their fleets hesitated as they realized it was no longer humanity alone. It was the galaxy itself rising. On the ground, soldiers from dozens of worlds fought shoulder to shoulder. A human marine pulled a wounded Ylvari out of the fire. A cairn miner lifted a collapsed beam so children co. Part 1. The Plea for Help. The galaxy had grown too quiet. Once it was filled with the laughter of traders moving from world to world, the chatter of students learning together on neutral stations, and the pride of fleets returning home after guarding the peace. But now silence hung heavy over broken stars. That silence was not peace. It was fear. The Vorlith had come. They were not builders. They were not dreamers. They were destroyers. For centuries they lingered in the dark edges of the spiral, growing strong while others forgot they even existed. And when they returned, they came with fire. Whole colonies were burned to ash. Cities that had stood for thousands of years became nothing but black stone and glass. The Vorlith did not want slaves. They wanted only to erase. The smaller nations were the first to fall. The proud Melnari fleets shattered in 3 battles. The Koresh homeworld was cracked open, its oceans boiling into space. The Sharon colonies, once known for their shining towers, were nothing but drifting wreckage in less than a year. It did not matter how brave the defenders were. Against the Vorlith war machine, courage was not enough. Soon even the great powers faltered. The Ylvari Commonwealth, ancient and wise, bent under the storm. Their fleets were vast, their technology unmatched in diplomacy and science, but they were not warriors. The Vorlith crushed their lines, scattering them like leaves in the wind. The Allied banners fell one by one. Each defeat tore another piece of hope from the galaxy's heart. It was then the plea began. At first, quiet whispers in broken halls of government, then louder, desperate calls in the surviving channels of communication, broadcasts carried across the void, bouncing from damaged relay to damaged relay. "We need heroes," they said. "We need someone to fight. If there are still voices left in the dark, rise. Stand with us." The words traveled far, carried on fragile signals across the emptiness of space. And though no one believed salvation would come, still they cried. On burning worlds, parents held their children close and whispered the same words, "Let someone answer. Let there be someone who can stand." The irony was cruel. For in the long history of the galaxy, they had feared one world above all others. They called it cursed. They called it untamable. A world of storms, predators, and endless struggle. A world where gravity crushed weaker species and where the very air was heavy with danger. The scholars and leaders had long agreed. No true civilization could come from such a place. But the galaxy was wrong. Life on that world had learned not just to survive, but to rise. Its people had built ships that broke their sky. They had crossed oceans of fire and storm. They had fought their own wars, bled their own scars, and come out stronger. They had a name that was rarely spoken outside hushed warnings. Earth. Now, as the broken broadcasts drifted through the stars, they reached ears on that death world. For the first time in living memory, Earth listened not to threats, not to challenges, but to cries for help. On a shattered station orbiting the ruins of Shara, a lone alien survivor whispered to a recorder, his voice weak but full of stubborn fire. "We do not need saints. We do not need gods. We need fighters. We need those who do not break when the storm comes. If you can hear us, whoever you are, be our heroes." The message was scattered, broken, but it carried. Through ruined relays, through damaged satellites, through the endless void, it traveled. And though the galaxy could not know it yet, that final desperate plea had been heard. Far away on a blue and green death world, a new kind of silence fell. One not of fear, but of decision. Earth had been called, and Earth was listening. Part 3. The Deathworlders Rise. The decision on Earth was not made with ease, nor with haste. For days, governments and councils argued. Some leaders feared the unknown. Others warned that humanity's own history of wars had left deep scars. "We have rebuilt ourselves," they said. "Do we dare throw our people into another's fire?" Yet for every voice of caution, another rose with fury. "We know what it is like to beg and be ignored. If we remain silent, we are no better than those who turned their backs on us in the past." In the end, humanity did what it had always done. It chose to fight. Factories that had long stood quiet rumbled to life, their furnaces blazing as steel was shaped into ships of war. Space yards glowed with activity as engineers worked day and night. reforging forgotten fleets. Old vessels that had once been mothballed were stripped, repaired, and upgraded. New carriers were launched into orbit, their hulls gleaming with purpose. The world that others had feared as savage now revealed its true face, not savage but unbreakable. The soldiers came next. They were not saints, not spotless champions. They were ordinary men and women who had grown up on a planet that demanded strength from the moment of birth. They remembered storms that tore through cities, wild beasts that tested villages, and disasters that shaped generations. Hardship was written into their bones, and now that hardship became their weapon. In the great training halls, recruits stood side by side, their faces solemn. They learned alien names, strange pronunciations of distant stars, and the tragedies that had befallen them. They saw images of shattered colonies, orphaned children, and burning skies. These were not just other species' wars. These were wounds that felt painfully familiar. And so when the call came for volunteers, the lines stretched beyond what commanders expected. Humanity was not just willing, it was ready. The first fleets launched under quiet skies. There were no parades, no celebrations, only silent determination. Families watched from Earth's surface as the stars swallowed their loved ones. Mothers whispered blessings. Fathers pressed hands against shuttle windows. Children clutched small keepsakes. It was not glory they sought. It was justice. The galaxy did not expect them. When human fleets emerged from jump corridors for the first time, the survivors of alien nations stared in disbelief. The humans did not arrive with fragile diplomats or cautious explorers. They arrived with warships forged like hammers, carriers that could disgorge endless wings of fighters, and armored soldiers who stood tall even in alien gravity. Their presence was not delicate, it was thunder. At first, the allies were unsure. Many whispered, "Can we trust them? Will they fight for us or for themselves?" The humans did not answer with words. They answered with action. In their first battle alongside alien survivors, they charged headlong into the Vorlith line. Their ships did not hesitate. Their fighters swarmed like predators of the void, striking engines, splitting armor, leaving Vorlith dreadnoughts drifting in fire. The Deathworlders had not come to negotiate. They had come to hunt. For the first time in years, the Vorlith stumbled. Their fleets, so used to breaking their enemies with fear, found themselves facing something different, something fierce, relentless, and unwilling to bend. Humanity fought as though every battle was personal. And in truth it was. Word spread quickly. Across shattered sectors, whispers turned to cries of awe. The Deathworlders have risen. The stories painted humans as demons of war, forged by storms and sharpened by fire. To frighten survivors, they were not demons. They were saviors. Yet humanity did not see themselves that way. On every battlefield, soldiers knelt beside wounded aliens, offering water, food, or a steady hand. They carried orphans from ruined shelters. They shared rations with strangers who had lost everything. For humans, fighting was only part of the mission. Protecting was the heart of it. And so the galaxy's image of Earth began to change. They were not saints in shining armor. They were not gentle heroes out of legends. They were harsher, grittier, scarred. But they were exactly what the galaxy needed. The plea for heroes had been answered not by angels but by Deathworlders. And once they had risen, there would be no turning back. Part 4. The Clash of Titans. The first real test came sooner than anyone expected. The Vorlith had swept into another sector, their dreadnoughts darkening the skies of 3 half-broken worlds. Survivors scattered, powerless to resist. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for yet another tragedy. But this time, something different appeared in the void. Human fleets dropped out of hyperspace like thunderheads forming before a storm. Their ships were not elegant, not polished like those of the older civilizations. They were sharp-edged, armored hulks bristling with weapons. Carriers loomed like floating fortresses, and swarms of smaller craft flared from their hangars. Where most fleets tried to look graceful, humanity's looked like fists. The Vorlith reacted with contempt. To them, these newcomers were just another species throwing themselves into the fire. Their dreadnoughts moved forward with practiced cruelty, confident that nothing could withstand their power. But humanity did not move like others. They did not scatter or retreat. They surged forward, closing the distance with frightening speed. Alien survivors watching from hidden stations gasped as human ships tore into the Vorlith line. Gunships weaved through enemy formations with precision, their cannons ripping into armor. Carriers unleashed wave after wave of fighters, each squadron striking like a coordinated pack of hunters. Every hit was brutal, every maneuver bold. Humanity fought as if they had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. The Vorlith did not understand. They had won for so long by instilling fear, but humans did not fear them. On the contrary, the Deathworlders seemed to thrive in the chaos. Where other fleets hesitated at their